Hi, this is Newt. Due to the virus, I'm recording from home, so you may notice a difference in audio quality. On this episode of Newt's World, I want to talk about the two great conventions that just ended. And I say great conventions because when the two national parties bring themselves together from all over the country, it is an extraordinary moment for freedom, for the American people to talk to themselves and to have a sense of all the things that are going on. And sometimes conventions have a way of sharing the real internal image of the two parties. It's interesting, for example, has been very underreported that the Democrats actually had about a third of their delegates voting against their platform. I think it was some 1,200 votes against the platform. It's also interesting that Biden basically was out of the picture until the last night, whereas Trump was in the picture every single day. Tells you both about their personalities, but also their political calculus. Biden, in many ways, had a very conventional convention, even if it was basically a Zoom meeting and fairly boring, but it didn't break free. Trump, on the other hand, did things like participating in a naturalization ceremony with new American citizens who came from Lebanon, Bolivia, India, Ghana, and Sudan. And on night two, he pardoned John Ponder, a former bank robber who went on to dedicate his life to help other prisoners. And with Ponder that day was the FBI agent who arrested him. And Ponder had become a real symbol of genuine conversion to Christianity, a genuine belief in helping others also be converted to a life without crime, being a good citizen. He is a great symbol of the notion of second chances, which is one of the things that this president has really taken up on, something which I think has gotten to his heart, is helping people have a second chance. It also tells you a little bit about where we are as a country, that after the speech on Thursday night, Senator Rand Paul and his wife were attacked by a mob of over 100 people and rescued by the police. And this kind of spontaneous, arrogant belief that you could impose on your fellow American and you could intimidate them and bully them, this has been growing, and it is presently going to lead to real confrontations, and it's going to lead to passing very stiff laws that if you threaten somebody, you could go to jail for the act of threatening them. I notice more and more that as they get desperate, the totalitarians of the left are moving towards more intimidation, more pressure, more face-to-face confrontation.
Well, the threats were to F you up, to kill you. The threats were if they could get hold of you, and I truly believe this with every fiber of my being, had they gotten at us, they would have gotten us to the ground. We might not have been killed. We might just have been injured by being kicked in the head or kicked in the stomach until we were senseless. You've seen the pictures. Most of the networks will not show the pictures of this. This is happening in all of our cities. It's got to stop. And thank God for the police. Had we not gotten to the police, I truly believe that the police saved our life, and we would not be here today, or we'd be in a hospital today had the police not been there.
I watched the Fox coverage right after the president's speech, and Rove had actually analyzed over 5,000 words. He said out of over 5,000 words, 564 were devoted to going after the Democrats, about 10% of the speech. The second term agenda was 401 words, looking at what are we going to do next. That was about 7%, which frankly was much less than I would have liked it to have been. I was hoping they'd be a much higher share of looking at the future. However, this was interesting, and I hadn't actually thought about it this way. The biggest part of the speech, according to Rove, was devoted to a defense of traditional American values and patriotism. And I must say, that's probably the part that most impressed both Callista and me as we watched it, was this sense that he did make you proud to be an American. And they said the second biggest portion was devoted to promises made, promises kept, at 956 words. Law and Order was third at 831 words. And then 636 words were devoted to the COVID response. So you see a really balanced speech that took 74 minutes to deliver. It felt more like a State of the Union than a campaign speech. And I thought that was exactly right. And the reason I say that is he's standing in front of the White House, not breaking precedent because Franklin Delano Roosevelt accepted the nomination in 1940 from the White House. He's in the position of President of the United States and candidate in that order. If you go back and listen to the tone, it's a deliberately understated feeling that he's chatting with you. He's not haranguing you. He's not giving you a campaign speech. He's talking with you about what he's learned, what we've accomplished, what we're going to do, what our values are. But it's all done in a way that makes it very accessible and frankly frustrated the news media, who, of course, if he had given a classic campaign address with his usual style, would have then attacked him for that. So whichever way he went, they were going to attack him. I think, personally, that this delivery and this speech was better because the country needed that kind of framework. But the convention was about more than the president. The convention was about painting a picture, and here I think the Republicans were just extraordinarily better than the Democrats. And let me start by saying that we did an analysis on the evening speakers. The Republicans averaged almost 9 years younger than the Democrats. So you now have a younger Republican Party, which is also an increasingly diverse party. And you saw that on the opening night when Tim Scott's speech knocked it out of the park. His great reference to his grandfather, who would have been 99 this year, and the notion that his grandfather, who was illiterate, worked hard, lived in a segregated society, that in one generation, as he put it, they went from cotton to Congress.
He lived long enough to see his grandson become the first African American to be elected to both the United States House and the United States Senate in the history of this country. Our family went from cotton to Congress in one lifetime.
And I thought Tim Scott was a remarkable advocate for an integrated America with opportunity for everyone. In addition, he did a superb job of talking about opportunity zones, which the president came back to, the vice president came back to. This will be one of the major themes of the second term, is taking these opportunity zones and turning them into genuine growth centers with economic growth, with safety, and with school choice so everybody can learn. I must say also the opening night, Ambassador Nikki Haley did her usual outstanding job. She's a great representative of a first-generation immigrant who has risen. She's a potential presidential candidate someday, former governor, former state legislator, former small business owner. She just has a great future. I thought she delivered brilliantly. And the RNC chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, who I had to write a note to because I thought she had put together an extraordinarily complex convention. You look at all the different places, all the different moving parts, everything that had to work, and you look at the tremendous diversity of people. And I would say that Chairwoman McDaniel did an amazing job for her party and for the country. I would also say that a very emotional moment with Natalie Harp talking as a cancer survivor, praising President Trump for his right to try legislation. You know, when you see somebody who literally is alive because of something the president has done and is able to share with you at a very personal level, it's just astounding.
I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for you.
And I think Natalie Harp was very effective and very touching as a human being. I'm also a big fan of Kim Klacik. If you have not seen her 2.5-minute commercial, you should go find it on YouTube. But Kim Klacik is a genuine star. She has told the truth about Democratic corruption and Democratic failure.
The Democrats have controlled this part of Baltimore City for over 50 years, and they have run this beautiful place right into the ground. We're sick of it. We're not going to take it anymore. The days of blindly supporting the Democrats are coming to an end.
Better than anybody I've seen. She is our nominee for Congress in Baltimore. Really quite remarkable. As a Georgian, it meant a lot to me to watch Herschel Walker, the great University of Georgia football player, an All-American. And I have to say, I really liked two things he did. One was the point where he said, look, I've known this guy for 37 years. And you must think I'm really stupid if I would have a really close friend who's a racist for 37 years.
I take it as a personal insult that people would think I've had a 37-year friendship with a racist. People who think that don't know what they're talking about. Growing up in the Deep South, I've seen racism up close. I know what it is, and it isn't Donald Trump.
And I thought it was the kind of personal witness that was just really powerful and really compelling. And it sort of said to all those liberals who want you to believe Trump's a racist, how are you going to answer Herschel Walker? Second, he told this great story.
One time, I planned to take his kids to Disney World with my family. At the last minute, Donald said he'd like to join us. So there he was, in a business suit, on It's a Small World ride. That was something to see. It just shows you what a caring, loving father he is.
Now, I have to tell you, one of my missions over the next week is going to be to try to track down that picture, because I think that will be so charming. Andrew Pollock was very emotionally powerful, the father of a daughter who was killed in Parkland, a father who said clearly that it was the policies of the left which had led to the kind of unwillingness to patrol which allowed the killer to stay in that school until they had a chance to kill Meadow Pollock and her classmates, and that any application of common sense conservatism would have kicked that person out of school and possibly put them in a situation where they got genuine professional care. Very compelling, very powerful, and took a lot of courage, I think, for Andrew Pollock to come and share that story with us. Everyone has been raving about Maximo Alvarez, the president of Sunshine Gasoline Distributors, a Cuban immigrant who understands the danger of totalitarianism, understands the danger of socialism, gave a powerful personal witness.
My family has fled totalitarianism and communism more than once. By the grace of God, I live the American dream, the greatest blessing I ever had. I am so grateful to America, the place where I was able to build my American dream. I may be a Cuban born, but I am 100% American. This is the greatest country in the world. If I gave away everything that I have today, it would not equal 1% of what I was given when I came to this great country of ours. The gift of freedom.
When you see First Lady Melania Trump, she is gorgeous. She brings dignity and beauty. If she were a liberal, she'd be in the same league as Jackie Kennedy, and she would be on every woman's magazine cover in the country. But she's not a liberal. And so some of the liberals even attacked her, which I thought was kind of mildly astonishing. First Lady Melania Trump gave, I thought, a well-written, well-delivered, clear speech that was very important. And then you end up with people like Bette Midler saying, oh, God, she still can't speak English. Can you imagine if a conservative said of an immigrant that they hadn't fully mastered English, they would just get their brains beaten out. But on the other hand, on the left, nothing that a Trump does can be actually applauded or you don't get invited back. But I thought Melania Trump was amazingly helpful, both on Tuesday night when she spoke and again on Thursday night when she came out with the president and stood out so clearly in the crowd. I thought it was appropriate to have Mike Pompeo talk from Israel because this president has just achieved the biggest breakthrough in 25 years in the Middle East in getting the United Arab Emirates and Israel to recognize each other. And next week, there will be the first flight directly from Israel to the United Arab Emirates. And it's the beginning of a genuine relationship, which really breaks up a lot of the logjam in the Middle East and may be followed in the next few months by several more countries recognizing Israel, which really begins to both vindicate the Trump strategy in the region, which many of the anti-Trumpers or never-Trumpers hated. But in fact, it has turned out to work when the strategy of the old order had failed consistently for 30 years. Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, the first black attorney general in Kentucky history, brilliant young man, clearly a leader of the future for the whole country, somebody who's, I think, going to be great at representing the kind of America we believe in, an America of talent, an America of merit and hard work, an America where anybody can rise. And he gave great witness to the opportunity that everyone has to rise in America, and is a clear alternative to the left's vision of a gloomy, hopelessly divided America in which you no point even trying. Daniel Cameron is absolute proof as the Attorney General of Kentucky that they don't have to let you. You can just go out and win it on your own. Abby Johnson gave the most powerful and compelling and disturbing pro-life witness ever given at a national convention. And it is a remarkable contrast that the small number of pro-life Democrats who are still active were not allowed to have a caucus at the Democratic convention because the left believes you cannot be pro-life and be a Democrat. But at the Republican convention, there were several people celebrating the legitimacy of life and taking on the Biden-Harris commitment to use tax-paid money even in the 9th month to pay for abortion. And Abby Johnson was very compelling in her witness about the pain involved in abortion.
Later in August, my supervisor assigned me a new quota to meet, an abortion quota. I was expected to sell double the abortions performed the previous year. When I pushed back, underscoring Planned Parenthood's public-facing goal of decreasing abortions, I was reprimanded and told, abortion is how we make our money. A physician asked me to assist with an ultrasound-guided abortion. Nothing prepared me for what I saw on the screen. An unborn baby fighting back, desperate to move away from the suction. And I'll never forget what the doctor said next. Beam me up, Scotty. The last thing I saw was a spine twirling around in the mother's womb before succumbing to the force of the suction. Abortion is real. I know what it sounds like. I know what abortion smells like.
Jason Joyce is a great example of the Trump system. He's a lobsterman from Maine. There had been a fight going on between the U.S. and the European Union. They had put in a tariff on lobsters from Maine, but not from Canada. So an entire business grew up in which, as a Maine lobsterman, you shipped your lobsters to Canada. They took a cut, and then they sent them to Europe. The president just recently got that entire tariff abolished. Jason Joyce's business is going to be better. Very, very important in Maine. Very important in the re-election of Susan Collins. And Jason Joyce was effective in just pointing out the practical reality that you have a president who's effective, who gets the job done. Similarly, Myron Lizer, the vice president of the Navajo Nation, witnessed the degree to which this president is committed to helping Native Americans lead the fullest possible life, have great effectiveness, and be totally involved in a better future. And I thought having him speak from Arizona was very important.
He established a task force called Operation Lady Justice to address the problem. The president also provided $273 million to improve public safety and support victims of crime in the Native American community. As a result, a cold case office was recently opened on the Gila River Indian community.
One of the most startling moments of the whole 4 days was John Ponder, the founder and CEO of Hope for Prisoners, someone who had been arrested years ago as a bank robber, converted to Christianity in prison, really found a commitment to reconciliation and to helping other prisoners. He was there with the FBI agent who had arrested him because they'd become very close friends. And the day he was going to speak, the president actually pardoned him. He'd already served his time, gotten out, but still had the conviction hanging over his head. Trump pardoned him, and what was a great moment of reconciliation. And Ponder's story is an example. Those of us who believe in prison reform to maximize the opportunity for prisoners to be rehabilitated, see Ponder as a great example of what we believe in, what we're trying to accomplish.
President Trump, he had made a bunch of promises. Let me just be transparent. When he first started talking about the things he was going to do, I'm sitting there going, wait a minute here. I mean, is he serious? Because everything that he was saying that he wanted to do was the stuff that needs to be done. And before he walked out that meeting that day, I promised I'll make it out there to, come speak at one of your graduations. I heard that they were phenomenal. When he stood there in that graduation and he went out of his way to shake the hand of every one of those 29 graduates, set them on a whole nother vista of life because they had the office of the President of the United States. The promises that he made was promises that he kept.
On Wednesday, to be at Fort McHenry, to be describing that magical moment during the War of 1812 when the British Navy was bombarding the fort, to describe the flag still flying, to explain the Star-Spangled Banner, to remind people why the first stanza ends, land of the free and home of the brave. As a party committed to honoring and treasuring and focusing on American history, American patriotism, American exceptionalism, I thought the vice president couldn't have picked a better place, and I thought he did a great job communicating that.
The heroes who held this fort took their stand for life, liberty, freedom, and the American flag. And those ideals have defined our nation.
In some ways, the most emotional moment Wednesday, and one which was so remarkable that I think people who saw it will never quite forget it, was Madison Cawthorn, who's 25 years old. If he gets elected, he will be the youngest member of Congress in 200 years. He was in a car accident, ended up being crippled below the waist, lost the use of both legs, spoke openly in his talk about having become depressed, the possibility of giving up, and then turned around and said, nope, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to lead a full life. Went into the real estate business. Now is the Republican nominee for North Carolina's 11th congressional district, and ended his speech by two guys coming out and helping him as he stood, holding on to a walker, but standing up, even though clearly he'd lost the use of his legs, something which President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had lost the use of his legs to polio, would have fully appreciated when Madison Cawthorn did it. What's amazing to me about Madison's remarkable moment and the witness he gave was how many people on the left then attacked him. I mean, when you start attacking somebody who's lost the use of both legs and who stands to indicate their commitment to standing for the flag and standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and standing for the national anthem, if they can do that, then the idea somebody on the left would attack them for it, I thought told you how deranged the left had become.
You can kneel before God, but stand for our flag. I say to Americans who love our country, young and old, be a radical for freedom. Be a radical for liberty. And be a radical for our republic, for which I stand. One nation under God, with liberty and justice for all.
On Thursday, it was also good to have Rudy Giuliani speak. No one in America has a better record of bringing crime under control than Rudy Giuliani in his partnership with Bill Bratton. Rudy's a guy who knows that this current surge in murders and shootings around the country absolutely can be fixed if you apply solid, sound policing principles, and if you apply solid, sound, conservative principles of locking up predators and not allowing them back on the street. I thought it was very important for Rudy to speak. As the convention was winding up, Ivanka Trump did a remarkable job of really outlining, both at a family level and at a professional level, the Donald Trump that she sees. I thought her description of her son creating a Lego version of the White House and the president displaying it was a great example. She is remarkably articulate, and she has a instinct for wanting to help people who are in need, whether it's a family that needs childcare, or it's a prisoner that needs rehabilitation, or it's somebody who needs to go to a school that actually succeeds. She was just, I thought, very powerful and compelling introducing the president.
Now more than ever, America needs 4 more years of a warrior in the White House. Tonight, I could not be more proud to introduce my father, a man I know was made for this moment in history. My fellow Americans, our First Lady and the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
President Trump spoke for over 70 minutes. First of all, the setting was remarkable. And I do want to repeat, it was not unprecedented. Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke from the White House in 1940 when he accepted his party's nomination for the 3rd time. The president, I thought, when he and Melania came out, they looked great. The background was fabulous. She looked remarkable standing next to him. She just stood out so vividly. I thought this was a time for a solemn, calm, serious speech. This is the psychological father of the country, the president, the commander-in-chief. He is reporting on his first 4 years, and he is sharing what he would do in his second 4 years. And I was very struck that he had a very calm delivery. He had a tempo that was designed so you could hear him. And I thought that the pacing was actually better for Trump than a normal campaign speech.
Together we will write the next chapter of the great American story. Over the next 4 years, we will make America into the manufacturing superpower of the world. We will expand opportunity zones. Thank you, Tim Scott. Bring home our medical supply chains, and we will end our resilience for bad things. We will go right after China. We will not rely on them one bit. We're taking our business out of China. We are bringing it home. We want our business to come home. We will continue to reduce taxes and regulations at levels not seen before. We will create 10 million jobs in the next 10 months.
I think we're at a moment in our country's history where it's the most important election since 1864. Lincoln, running for re-election in 1864, was up against McClellan, who would have allowed the South to secede, would have allowed slavery to exist, and would have, in effect, destroyed the United States. So the gap between electing McClellan and electing Lincoln was enormous. I think the gap here is not quite that big, but there's no election in between that's comparable. So over a century and a half, this is the most important election. What you want when you have this many different problems all piling up is you want calm, steady confidence. You want a sense of purpose. You want a sense of effectiveness. This was, I think, the most important single speech of the whole campaign. It was designed to say to all of us, I am deeply committed to this kind of America. I am deeply committed to every American having a better future. I thought it was the right speech with the right tone. Pull up the Biden text and the Trump text. Notice how Biden is almost entirely emotion and no facts, no real proposals, no real policies, because frankly, all of their policies are so bad that if they start telling you about them, they're going to lose votes every single time they talk about them. And then look at what Trump did, step by step, building block by building block, and you can see the difference in the two parties. Finally, I can't wrap up the week without also mentioning that when the singing goes from opera to proud to be an American to everything in between, you have a sense of a presidency which is appealing to all sorts of different Americans. And I think that's a hallmark of this president. Now, I think you have to look at the two conventions side by side and then say, what does it all mean? I think you have a Democratic Party which is old, it's tired. Somebody calculated that the top three Democratic leaders in the Congress have between them something like 126 years of experience, which means 126 years in Washington. You have a Democratic Party whose Speaker of the House and vice presidential candidate both come from San Francisco, a city so liberal it's collapsing, with people literally leaving the city because they can't take any more the homeless, the feces in the street, the crime, etc. I think you had a Democratic Party who is tired, falls back on left-wing slogans. Biden gave a decent speech. Because our expectations were so low, we thought it was a good speech. If we'd actually measured him against normal politicians, we'd have said adequate speech. You had lots of different interesting people coming from all over the place on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, you had the fact is Michelle Obama couldn't be bothered to leave their home in Cape Cod. The fact is Hillary Clinton couldn't be bothered to leave her home in New York. And so you had all of these kind of disjointed sort of family videos. The production was okay, but it wasn't striking, it wasn't powerful. You compare that with the energy, the passion, the commitment of the various witnesses, and that's really what they were. They were witnesses on the Republican side. And as I tweeted at one point, you now have an emerging, idea-oriented, younger, inclusive Republican Party, far and away the most inclusive party in the history of the Republican Party. More people of more backgrounds were in this convention for these 4 days than ever in the history of the Republican Party, which explains part of the never-Trumpers who are just bitter, tired people who resent all this new energy, all these new ideas, all these new approaches. What do I think it means? Well, first of all, I think it's very telling that Trump actually gained ground the week of the Democratic convention. He was more acceptable at the end of the week than the beginning, which, frankly, if you're the Democrats, should worry you a whole lot. I think that it is clear that neither on the Chinese virus nor on violence in the streets do the Democrats have any solutions. I think that it's very likely that you're now going to see a growing crescendo, and that by the time we get to the election, that the president will win by a surprising margin. There's one projection by a guy who uses primary vote turnout, and his model has worked for 25 of the last 27 elections, going back to 1912. And he predicts Trump gets 376 electoral votes. I wouldn't be shocked by that, because I think the Democrats are likely to collapse. And I think that Trump's share of the black vote, his share of the Hispanic vote, his share of the Asian vote will be an all-time high. I also think a lot of people who aren't always happy with his tweets, they're not always happy with the toughness of his personality, when they watch what's going on in the street. My wife and my son-in-law are both from Wisconsin. What they're seeing in Kenosha is totally unacceptable to the average person in Wisconsin. And I think you see this happening again and again. I think the other night when people leaving the White House were being harassed, attacked, bullied, I think people bitterly resent that. And I think all of that undermines the Democratic Party. And so I think that this was a very important 2 weeks. These are the 2 weeks when Biden had to break out. He failed. And these are 2 weeks when Trump had to reassure us that he really was capable of being president, and he really did have a vision for the future, and he really did represent a very broad America. And I think he achieved in that. And so I would say we are leaving the convention period, going into the general election, with enormous opportunity for not just President Trump, but for the entire Republican ticket. You can read more about the Republican National Convention and my take on it on our show page at newtsworld.com. Newt's World is produced by Gingrich 360 and iHeartMedia. Our executive producer is Debbie Myers, and our producer is Garns Islam. The artwork for the show was created by Steve Penley. Special thanks to the team at Gingrich 360. Please email me with your questions at gingrich360.com/questions. I'll answer them in future episodes. If you've been enjoying Newt's World, I hope you'll go to Apple Podcasts and both rate us with 5 stars and give us a review so others can learn what it's all about. On the next episode of Newt's World, The Immortals, Dwight David Eisenhower continues with Part 2, The War Years. I'm Newt Gingrich. This is Newt's World. Newt Gingrich here to tell you about AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. AMAC is the conservative alternative to other 50-plus groups. And like you, the folks at AMAC see clearly the problems facing America. Government growth, eroding liberties, and the enormous financial burden our children and grandchildren will inherit if we do nothing. Stand with AMAC and me by joining today at amac.us/Newt. That's amac.us/Newt.